I had a friend that he worked for.
Ron said 3 slides a minute. That's what he said. I said, I already got 3 slides around. He said, it's a minute. All right. Morning can start the clock, man. This is the quarter, no, the bi-monthly update today? Just, all months to report. When you've been waiting for 15 days for it. It feels like not that. I don't hit him with that binder or kill something. Gonna rob him. Binder, you even labeled it, man.
That's something I got for Casantini. This?
I'm not sure how they came up with the estimate, but there's a updated estimate. He did.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, April 25th, 2024 Finance and Audit Committee regular meeting agenda. Let's see. I don't know that I've truly opened this before. Now, Madam Clerk, do you read our Zoom information?
I do not. It is presented on the agenda, but I do take roll call.
All right, well, let's proceed with the roll call, please.
Yes, Director Weber,
Present?
Director Jones,
Here?
Director Clark. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we have the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the committee's scope, including items on or not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the audience or online that care to speak?
There are currently no online attendees.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we have our consent items, of which we have 2. Chair will entertain a motion for consent. First and seconded, please call roll.
Yes, Director Weber,
Aye.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Now, I thought on we only have the one presentation item
Yes.
tonight. All right, thank you very much. Our presentation item, bi-monthly fiscal report through February, and CFO Dave O'Toole is at the podium. Welcome, sir. Please
you.
begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Directors, Fire Chief House, colleagues, public. Tonight's bi-monthly fiscal report covers the first 8 months of the fiscal year, so that's all the way through February of 2024. And an important reminder for tonight, I just want to say up front, is we always reference the most recent enacted budget when we're presenting these. So the most recent enacted budget was the mid-year budget. So there's a reference change in this presentation. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide shows your general fund cash balance trends through February 29, 2024. The red line is the current year, and the green line is past year, prior year. After 8 months, the trajectory is pretty historical norm there, where we spend down into the dry period, if you will, and then we get payments, property tax payments from the county in January or so, and the numbers come up, and then we spend a little more, and then they come up again in April. So following a historical trajectory there. Cash was positive. You can see there the last red dot there. Cash was positive $34.9 million, about $27.2 million higher than last year at the end of February. The difference I would just characterize as mainly related to timing and having not spent down more this year. So we'll see the lines start to intersect more later this fiscal year. This next slide is total revenues, total general fund revenues. Let's see, the red line is the current year again, fiscal year 23-24. The green line is prior year, and the blue line is budget. all the way to the right, you see the blue line, final number is 295.2 million. That is the mid-year number for total revenues, total general fund revenues. Let's see, as shown, actual revenues were at 154.1 million through February, which was $8.4 million more than last year, and $9 million less than the mid-year budget forecast. So revenues coming in a little lower than budget. Let's see, I guess I would comment there is that you do see that surge number, that surge later in the fiscal year, historical surge when those April revenues come in. So we'll need to keep an eye on it, but I think it's, wow, we really haven't seen the numbers come in until our next report. Now we'll look at an element of revenues, which is medic revenues. The red line tracking very closely with the blue line, as you would expect when we adjust for mid-year. Let's see, at 30.8 million, they're $2.6 million higher EMS revenues are than prior year. And we're actually $200,000 over mid-year budget at this point through February. Total EMS revenues in the mid-year budget were 47.4 million. That's the end of the blue line there. And just before I leave this slide, I want to mention that when I present this to you next, we're probably going to see, or we will see the red and the blue line deviate. The red will go down, and that is related to a cyber attack with, not here, not in our building, but with the payments processor for our ambulance provider, and they were out of commission for a few weeks, and so they weren't able to accept payments right away, and they have warned us or told us that you will see those numbers come down in April, and then they'll tick back up as they show that they got processed. So they were hit by a cyber attack, had a delay. I just want to let you know that you can't see that now, but when I present in a couple months, you'll see that dip. And then it'll come back up. We will hit the final. We expect to hit the final total, the final budget in total as predicted, expected. So let's see. Moving on to PPG-EMT. These next two slides are PPG-EMT. The first one is last fiscal year. You recall that PPG-EMT started in January of 2023, so you had 6 months of the new program, not a full year. And the gray line there is 1.6, almost 1.7. That is if we're receiving everything, each of those red bars would be at that height. So if you're tracking this closely, you notice that those red lines are creeping up. They're getting closer to that 1.7 every year. If you added up all the gaps there in each month from January to June, it'd be about a total of 1.7. So another way of saying that is we are still anticipating 1.7 in payments from last fiscal year, which has come down substantially. So we're starting to see some normalizing here. The number of plans that have not fully paid up is narrowed to just a handful. So that is the update for last year. Now this next slide will look into this fiscal year. So again, with the mid-year budget, we now expect to get about the same amount, but almost 1.7 on a monthly basis. You can see, for example, in July, we were at 1.3 million, so we're creeping closer. But as you get closer to this month in February, that number is 12,000. So obviously, the plans, the health plans, when they're paying these, they're trying to get the older ones off the books first. So that's why you see the numbers decline as you get into the last reported month. So yeah.
Yes, excuse me, Dave, I have a question, a question on the comparisons. We've touched base on this we have touched base on one of these two items about the comparison between 2022, 23, and 23, 24. Is the second slide, 23, 24, is that also month of transport?
Yes, if I understand
Because we're
your
trying to
question.
compare the same thing over 2 years, correct? Year and a
Yes.
half? All right. No, thank you very much. So we are looking at the same revenue source.
Yeah, so the two slides they're treated the same way. We expect to get that 1.7 every month.
All righty. Well, then the other point, and you and I have touched on this, for those who may be observing the PowerPoint here, recall that look at the y-axis is different on these two. The first one goes up to 2.5 million, and then the 23, 24 goes up to 1.8. So if you're glancing through and you look at the red, it is not the same. So one needs to pay attention to the numbers that Dave has provided us at the top of the different red lines. So maybe next time we can have a little bit more of a visual comparison.
Sure, I will make that change.
Yeah, I'd appreciate, well, we had touched base on that earlier
Yeah,
about
and I-
how, well, let's look at the numbers and such. So thank you for the clarification.
Certainly, thank you. So leaving PPGEMT and then leaving revenues, if you will, over to expenditures. So again, we have the three colored lines here. The budget is the blue line, the green is as past year, and the red is actual through February. Let's see, after 8 months, expenditures relative to the mid-year budget are still well below budgeted expenditures and slightly over prior year expenditures. So we are currently at at the end of February, we're at $186.9 million in actual expenditures, which was $11.1 million more than last year and $19.7 million less than what was budgeted. So when I talk about those delays in spending, we see surges at the end where the department goes through an exercise, we're spending what we can to get those last minute items. We expect that 19.7 to narrow quite a bit. This next is a component of spending, so it's labor costs. Again, we're tracking as expected. Really, the actuals through February are very close to budget. Let's see. At the end of February, actual labor costs were $158.2 million, tracking right with the mid-year budgeted number, and $13.7 million higher than last year at that point. So that's the last of your general fund revenue expenditure slides. Now we're going to take a look at reserve balances. You see that up and down pattern again. Similar to the cash balance slide, there are two dips and two surges. Again, here the green line is prior year, red is current. And the purple dotted line towards the top there shows you where a 15% reserve would be. So you can see it started near there. We got near there in December, and now we're spending down. We're getting further from a positive reserve, and then we expect it to bounce back up as we get the April payments in. Let's see. And this next slide is the CERT, the California Employers Retirement Benefit Trust Fund, which we use to offset other post-employment benefit liabilities. Let's see, the total value of the fund at the top is $83.2 million, which is about $1.5 million more than our last bi-monthly report. So there's strong investment gains sort of continued. You can see at the far right, you can see the color, the green shifting up to the right, which is a good sign. Let's see, for perspective, since the inception, the district has contributed $59.4 million of the $83.2 million in value. The annualized rate of return over 11 and a half years is about 6.4%. Not too bad. So for the next three slides, I'm going to step away and have Controller Ron Empedrad come up. But by way of background or reminder, last year the committee asked us to do a fraud risk assessment, and we did that through most of 2023. There were more than 900 risk criteria were examined, covering 12 different risk areas. In the end, we had 22 findings that we needed to follow up on. So Ron's going to give us an update on that. Another commitment we made to this committee as well is we'd come back and report at least quarterly. So this is our first quarterly report after we presented the report in January. With that, I'll turn it over to Ron.
Good afternoon, directors, Chief House. In my last report to this committee, I presented the results of the audit, the fraud risk assessment report, and along with that report, I provided a list of 22 recommendations designed to strengthen the district's internal controls, as well as reduce our exposure to fraud risk. At the time of that report, of the 22 recommendations, 8 recommendations were fully implemented. As of today, we added 3 new recommendations to the list of fully implemented recommendations, bringing our total to 11 fully implemented recommendations. These recommendations are, number 1, the addition of an audit stipulation on high-risk vendor contracts. An example of a high-risk vendor contracts would be high dollar value construction contracts. One example that comes to mind is the upcoming Zinfandel construction. So that in that contract, we will be adding an audit stipulation. Second recommendation that we implemented is the adoption of a food policy and the provision of training to our employees. We did that back in February. And the last one is the managerial review of payroll registers by someone not directly involved in the processing of payrolls. That someone is me as a district's controller. We've also partially implemented one recommendation, and that is we uploaded to the district's website, particularly the transparency page, our Metroway document and the conflict of interest policy. What remains to be uploaded is the code of conduct, and that is still under review. So what remains, recommendations that remain and are in process will be 10 recommendations. And so this is the listing of those recommendations. The first 2 recommendations relate to our code of conduct, and that's assigned to the HR division. And this may require conferring with the union. The next 6 recommendations, the middle 6, they're all designed to strengthen our disbursement controls and also improve our financial operations. And these 6 are assigned to the finance division. The last 2 recommendations are designed to improve our access controls and to ensure that we recover from disasters. And these last 2 are assigned to the IT division. So total of 10 recommendations, and we're going to provide quarterly updates regarding our progress in implementing these recommendations. Our next update would be probably in next 2 months from now, which is the June report. With that, I'm turning it back to Dave.
Thank you, Ron. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Apanat? Thank you. Yes.
Oh, for Dave, yes.
All right, now or later, Director?
Later.
Okay.
Want to make him nervous for a little bit.
Stu. So this is your summary takeaways through February of 2024. Again, the actual general fund cash remained higher than prior year by about 27.2 million at the end of February. Overall general fund revenue still lagging the budget by about 9 million below the mid-year forecast. The expenditure, or PPGMT, so we see the gaps narrowing, so 1.6 million under for 23-24, and that 6.6 should be 5.7 million short after 8 months of 23-24. So, and that, let's see, and then the next is general fund expenditures are $17.7 million lower than the mid-year budget, and as Ron just mentioned, we have 11 of 22 fraud risk assessment items implemented. So with that, I think I have one more slide, actually. There we go. Any questions and comments? Of course.
I see Director Weber at the bottom of that one. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you. The board was informed recently that we're 81,000 and change in deficit with the work comp situation right now. What is the process, or what are you doing in the next cycle? Are we bumping that number up so we're not running into this? I know that we've said in the past we'll move monies over to go ahead and cover that, but instead of having to do that year to year to year, are you thinking a bigger number next year? What's your thought process on that?
So in the final budget, we budgeted workers' comp at 3.6 million. And then by the time we were doing mid-year, we recognized that it's going to go over that. So in the mid-year budget, we bumped it up to 6.3 million. And there's no sign that we're going to exceed that. So we are, unless something extraordinary happens, we are well situated with funding for workers' comp for the rest of this fiscal year. But to the second part of your question, okay, what do we need to do different? I would agree that 3.6 million does not look like a sufficient fund right now. So it's something we're looking at. I imagine that to be higher. There are some trends happening with the new TPA. I think some costs are actually coming down. If I will be able to show you this when we're doing the mid-year, but I'm actually, since the third-party administrator took over, I'm actually noticing costs are coming down. That's separate and apart from extraordinary claims. So we may get a few big claims that come in that kind of, shake things up, add additional costs we weren't anticipating. But generally, I'm actually watching costs go down a little bit.
Then maybe this is a question for you, Chief. What is that 81,000? Was that projected that we were falling below, or where is 81,000 that you spoke about?
I think that was in Dave's report where we added money at mid-year.
Okay, so we're not in the deficit. Okay, I misread that then. Thank you,
We did need to add money mid-year, absolutely.
thank you.
Any other further questions for Dave? Thank you, sir. All right. Okay, that concludes our presentation items for tonight. And we will, oh gosh, our next meeting is probably in about a month. If there's nothing for the general welfare, we will adjourn this meeting. Okay, here so done.
Recording stopped.